It was just another night, the kind of night where everything is still. The city outside, winding down the hallway lights dim, the only sound in Jacqueline's apartment, a faint hum from the fridge. She had done what she always did, brushed her teeth in silence, turned off the light in the kitchen with muscle memory, checked the lock twice, even though she lived in a building with a doorman, crawled under her blanket with a tired sigh. That night, Jacqueline wasn't thinking about anything heavy. Not her job, not her family, not the weight she carried on her back every single day. Just her bed. Just her birthday, which was hours away. She didn't expect much from it, honestly. A cupcake maybe, a quiet walk. Maybe she'd even treat herself to a morning coffee from the expensive cafe on Ninth. That would be enough. She was the kind of woman who didn't need grand gestures. She had grown used to quiet birthdays and forgotten calls, used to showing up for others and no one showing up for her. So when her eyes finally closed, it wasn't with anticipation, it was with resignation. And then it came. Buzz, one soft vibration, a glow from her nightstand. Jacqueline opened one eye. She reached for her phone, still halfway in sleep. Maybe it was a spam message, or her cousin tagging her in another late-night tic-tac. But as soon as she saw the notification banner, the air in the room changed. Bank alert, your account has been overdrawn. She sat up, fast, opened her banking app with shaking fingers. The screen loaded, and there it was, $1,516.21. She stared. The number didn't feel real. Her mind raced for answers. Maybe a glitch. Maybe it was fraud. Maybe someone had hacked her. She refreshed. Once, twice. The number didn't change. But something inside her did. That moment, 3:35 a.m., would become the fault line of her life. Before that number, she was asleep. After it, she would never rest the same again. There's something strange about seeing a number so big, so wrong, that your brain just shuts down. Jacqueline stared at the screen like it was in a foreign language. Minus $45,516.21. Her brain couldn't even hold the shape of it. It wasn't just money. It was years. Years of working overtime. Skipping vacations. Packing lunches to save a few dollars, saying I'm fine when she really wasn't, just to hold it together. She blinked. Once. Twice. Still there. She tried to breathe, but it was like her chest had collapsed. Her stomach twisted. Her ears rang. It was the kind of number that didn't just hurt, it humiliated. Who would do this? What kind of stranger could drain her like that? And then the worst part hit her. They weren't strangers. They had her face, her blood, her last name. The people who called her our miracle. The ones who used to kiss her forehead and say they were proud of her. The ones who told the neighbors she's the one who made it. And now they had emptied her bank account like it was theirs to take. Not hacked, not stolen, taken with trust. And that's what cut the deepest. It wasn't just a financial betrayal. It was personal, intimate, quietly cruel. And for the first time in her adult life, Jacqueline didn't cry. She didn't panic. She froze like a wire had been cut in her chest, like a light had gone out. Jacqueline scrolled through the transaction history with trembling fingers. One swipe, another. Each line felt like a punch to the chest. Car dealership, $22,000. Bike and repair shop, $3,200. Out-of-network hospital charges, $600-700. Mortgage payments, utility bills, retail orders. The names were familiar, not the businesses, the addresses. Her parents' street, her brother's zip code, her mom's pharmacy. And that's when it hit her. This wasn't some hacker from across the world. This wasn't a stolen identity. This was them, her own family. They hadn't guessed her passwords. They didn't need to, because she had given them everything. Over the years, she'd set up the accounts. Just in case, Dad. Don't worry, I'll co-sign it, Mom. Yeah, I'll use my card, but pay me back later. Except no one ever paid her back. They just kept swiping. Because Jacqueline had always been the responsible one. Because she never said no. Because every time she tried to draw a line, they made her feel like a monster. You're selfish. You're not grateful. You've changed. But now she saw it clearly. She hadn't changed. They had revealed themselves. This wasn't about helping anymore. This was about how easily they could betray her. How entitled they felt to her effort, her money, her peace, as if it was owed to them simply because they were related. Jacqueline's hands curled into fists, not from anger, but from clarity. She had spent a lifetime loving people who didn't love her the same way back. People who didn't even respect her enough to ask before taking. And now she knew their names, not as family, but as the ones who taught her the cost of misplaced trust. Jacqueline didn't want to believe it. There had to be an explanation, a mistake, a glitch, some misunderstanding that could be fixed with a simple phone call. So she called her father. It rang once, twice, then he picked up. Loud music played in the background. Laughter, voices. It sounded like a party. "Hello," he said, casually, like everything was normal. "Dad," Jacqueline said, trying to steady her voice, "something's wrong. My account, it's overdrawn. $45,000. Was it you? Did something happen?" A pause. Not confusion, not guilt, just annoyance. He sighed. "You're always so dramatic." Jacqueline's heart sank. She waited, hoping he'd explain, hoping this wasn't real. But his voice stayed flat, almost irritated. "The family needed help," he said. "Your mom had surgery. Your brother's truck broke down. The mortgage was behind. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. Her hands went cold. And then from the background came her mother's voice, sharp, amused. "What were you going to do with that money anyway?" she laughed. "Buy yourself cake and candles? We had better plans." Jacqueline sat in stunned silence. The line went quiet, too. No apology, no remorse, just that emptiness, that horrible echoing silence. And somehow that silence was louder than any scream. That moment, more than the overdraft, more than the betrayal, became the real heartbreak. Because in that second, Jacqueline realized they never saw her as family. They saw her as a bank, as a backup plan. And worse, they felt entitled to her. She took one breath, and then another, and with the calmest voice she could find, she said, "Then don't ever call me again." And she hung up. It wasn't an explosion. It was a quiet funeral, a burial of the last bit of hope she had in them. The words echoed in her head long after the call ended. "You owe us." 3 words. 3 syllables. Enough to rewrite her entire childhood. Jacqueline sat on the edge of her bed, phone still in her hand, screen dimmed, silence roaring in her ears. You owe us. Not "we're sorry," not "we should have asked," just that brutal, bone-deep declaration. Like her entire life had been alone. Like every hug, every packed lunch, every ride to school came with invisible interest rates. Love turned into debt collection. It hurt more than the overdraft. Because money could be replaced. But what do you do when your entire childhood has a balance sheet? She thought about all the time she stepped in, all the time she said yes without hesitation. She paid the electricity bill at 19 because her mom couldn't. She put her name on a loan so her dad could get a second chance. She bailed her brother out of a repo with her own emergency fund. She did it all not out of obligation, but out of love. A love that she thought was mutual. But now it had been rebranded. We needed help. We raised you. You wouldn't be who you are without us. Every sentence was a transaction. every memory now tainted with strings. And the most painful part, she had believed it too for years, believed she had to earn their affection, that her value came from how much she could carry, that saying no meant being disloyal. But in that moment, everything turned crystal clear. Love is not a loan, and family is not a bill. Jacqueline stood up, not with rage, not with tears, but with resolve. Because when someone weaponizes your love, the only defense is distance. That night, Jacqueline didn't sleep. She laid in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. But what she saw wasn't the plaster above her. She saw memories. Not the good ones, the heavy ones, the blurry ones, the ones she had buried under responsibility and guilt. She saw herself at 16 slipping her lunch money into her mom's purse because the power bill was overdue. She saw herself at 21 picking up a second job, not to travel, not to shop, but to cover her brother's tuition after he dropped out of community college. She saw herself driving 2 hours at midnight to bring groceries to her parents when they said they were just a little tight this month. Every moment flooded back like a tidal wave of quiet sacrifices. And in each of those memories, no one said thank you, not once. Not when she bailed them out, not when she missed out, not when she broke down quietly in the bathroom, wiped her tears, and kept going. Because in her family, helping wasn't kindness. It was expected. It was her role, her identity. You're the strong one. You always know what to do. We don't know how we'd survive without you. It sounded like praise, but it was a prison, a compliment laced with chains. Because strong meant don't complain. Reliable meant don't stop. Successful meant you owe us everything. And Jacqueline finally saw it for what it was. Not gratitude, just dependence wearing a mask. It was supposed to be her birthday, just a simple day. Jacqueline didn't expect flowers, or a cake, or a surprise party. She wasn't that kind of person. A text would have been enough. A quiet lunch. A small candle in a store-bought cupcake. That was the kind of celebration she had grown used to, the kind she had learned to accept. But this year, she didn't even get that. Instead, she got a bank alert. Instead of happy birthday, she got your account is overdrawn. Instead of a gift, she got a reminder that even on her day, she wasn't allowed to be the one who mattered. They took everything, not just the money, but the moment, her moment. While she sat alone staring at that balance, her parents were laughing in the background. They were at a restaurant, spending her money. They were celebrating, but not her. What were you going to do with that money anyway? Cake and candles? They said it like a joke. But to Jacqueline, it wasn't funny, because that cake wasn't about sugar. That candle wasn't about wax. It was about being seen, about having one day, just one, where she was allowed to feel like she mattered. And they didn't just forget. They took that day and made it theirs. They turned her birthday into their bailout, their emergency fund, their party. And in that moment, Jacqueline realized something brutal. Her birthdays were never really hers. They were just deadlines for everyone else's needs. And now, even that small corner of joy had been stolen. It was supposed to be a throwaway line, a joke, nothing serious, but it stuck. What were you going to do with that money? Her mother had laughed. Buy cake and candles. Jacqueline didn't answer. Because how do you explain that yes, that was exactly what she was going to do? She wasn't planning a party. She wasn't booking a trip. All she wanted was a little quiet joy, a small slice of sweetness just for her. But now, even that was laughable. Not just dismissed, but mocked. They made her feel stupid for wanting something so simple, something so human. And that hurt more than the overdraft. Because when someone takes your money, that's theft. But when they take your joy and laugh at it, that's cruelty. That's when Jacqueline understood they didn't just see her as a provider. They saw her as someone who didn't deserve to be celebrated. Her milestones were optional, her needs negotiable, her happiness expendable, and all she had wanted was cake. Some people scream when they're hurt. Jacqueline didn't. She sat in her bedroom, phone still warm in her hand. Her heart was pounding, but her face was calm, almost too calm. That one sentence from her mother kept playing in her head, buy cake and candles, and then her father's voice, you owe us. She stared at the wall for what felt like a full hour, and in that silence she found something rare, clarity. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a betrayal anymore. It was a pattern, one she had been caught in her entire life. Love for them had always meant giving, and giving meant Jacqueline never got to be a person, only a source. So she lifted the phone again, dialed. Her father answered, still casual. Jacqueline? She didn't waste time. Her voice was steady, like a judge passing a sentence. Don't ever call me again. And then, click. No shouting, no drama, just a clean, surgical silence. The silence wasn't an absence, it was a gift. Because for the first time in her life, Jacqueline realized silence is not empty. Silence is freedom. Letting go doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it's quiet, intentional, almost gentle, like pulling a thorn from your skin with steady hands. That's how Jacqueline did it. No yelling, no warning text, no dramatic declarations, just action. That night, while the rest of the city slept, Jacqueline stayed up, not crying, but moving. She opened her laptop and logged into every account. Bank, utilities, insurance, the mortgage she signed for, the truck loan she co-signed, streaming services, family phone plans. Line by line, click by click, she disconnected. No explanations, no apologies, just clicks. She wasn't punishing them, she was freeing herself. Because sometimes the most powerful form of self-respect isn't a fight, it's an exit, and she took it. Not to hurt them, but to finally protect her. She didn't scream. She didn't slam doors. She didn't type out a long message saying how much they hurt her. She logged in, one by one, each account, each tie, each string they used to pull her back. Bank account, credit cards, loan portals, streaming subscriptions, phone plan admin, insurance profiles. Click, click, click. Freeze, cancel, delete, revoke. Jacqueline didn't flinch. She wasn't acting out of anger. She was acting out of something sharper, clarity. They had taken everything quietly, so now she would take herself back the same way. She didn't need their permission, didn't need their reaction. She just needed space, and that space started with a mouse click. One account at a time, she reclaimed her name, her peace, her future, not with a bang, but with a cursor. The house, it had always been theirs emotionally, but legally, it was hers. Jacqueline was the one who signed the mortgage. Why? Because her mother's credit wasn't good enough. Because her father said, it's just paperwork, sweetheart. We'll pay it, don't worry. And for years, she believed him. For years, she carried the weight of their house while living in a small apartment she could barely afford. They got the backyard, the fireplace, the new appliances. She got the monthly alert, the anxiety, the quiet resentment. But now, that was over. Jacqueline logged into the mortgage portal. She knew exactly what to do. Auto-pay off. Linked card removed. Owner access locked. And just like that, the house was no longer their safety net. It was their wake-up call. She wasn't afraid of the fallout. She wasn't worried about the missed payments. Because for the first time, she wasn't just taking back her money. She was taking back her power. The truck had always been her brother's pride. Big, loud, more expensive than he could ever afford. But Jacqueline had made it possible. She co-signed the loan, her credit score, her name. He said he'd handle the payments. He didn't. Month after month, the notifications rolled in. Late fees, missed dues, excuses. Jacqueline had covered it too many times, too quietly. So this time, she didn't call, she didn't argue, she didn't warn. She just opened her bank's fraud portal and checked a box. This charge was unauthorized. The system did the rest. By noon the next day, the truck was gone, towed from the driveway like it never belonged there, because in truth, it didn't. Jacqueline watched the tow report online. She didn't smile, she didn't cry. She just sipped her coffee and whispered, "One less thing they can use my name for." Jacqueline had always been the one with the good credit. That phrase had followed her like a leash. Need a loan? Ask Jacqueline. Need a new phone plan? Put Jacqueline's name down. Want to rent that apartment? Jacqueline will co-sign. And every time she hesitated, they said, "Come on, we're family. You can trust me. It's just a signature." But signatures bleed, she learned. They bleed money. They bleed trust. They bleed you. And now she was done bleeding. She spent the afternoon making calls, sending emails, removing her name from every joint loan, filing formal withdrawals from co-signed accounts, notifying the lenders I am no longer responsible. There were protests from the bank, from the people she helped. "You're just going to walk away?" her cousin texted. Jacqueline didn't reply. She just stared at the document, confirming her release, and whispered, "Yes, I'm walking toward peace." They never asked before logging into her Netflix. They never paid a dime toward the Wi-Fi bill. They never said thank you when their Prime packages showed up 2 days early. But now they noticed. Jacqueline sat at her kitchen counter, laptop open, coffee in hand, one tab at a time. Netflix, sign out of all devices, change password, done. Amazon Prime, cancel household access, lock card, done. Utilities, remove autopay, change login, switch address, done. No rage, no warnings, just quiet closure. She imagined the first time they tried to log in, that spinning wheel, that wrong password prompt. That text they'd probably send her, "Hey, did something happen to the account?" She wouldn't reply. She wouldn't explain. Because comfort is not a birthright, especially when it's stolen. She sipped her coffee again and whispered, "Ghosted, just like I was." They treated her like an ATM with a heartbeat, a support system they didn't respect, a daughter they didn't listen to, a sister they could guilt into submission. But Jacqueline, she had never forgotten who held the passwords. The signatures, the legal ownership. They had mistaken her kindness for weakness, her silence for surrender, and now they were confused, furious, fumbling. "You're tearing this family apart," her mother cried into voicemail. "You can't just cut us off," her brother shouted outside her building. But the truth was simple. They didn't think she'd do it, but she did. Quietly, cleanly, completely. She looked in the mirror that evening, and for the first time in years, she didn't see a daughter, a sister, or a lifeline. She saw Jacqueline, whole, free, in control. And she whispered to the version of herself they had ignored for too long, "You forgot I was the one in control." But I didn't. It started at 8:06 a.m. The doorbell rang, then again, and again, and again. Jacqueline stood in the hallway barefoot, holding her morning tea. She didn't move. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Her phone lit up, 12 missed calls, 4 voicemails, a text from her cousin, "Unblock mom. She's outside. Please just talk to her." Jacqueline walked slowly to the door, looked through the peephole. There was her mother, hair messy, still in pajamas, holding something in her arms. A photo album, old pictures, family smiles, proof of what used to be. A trap disguised as nostalgia. She didn't open the door. She walked back to her tea, sat down. Let the doorbell ring, because this time she knew the difference between love and emotional blackmail, and silence was her new boundary. By noon, her name was already on Facebook. Not tagged, but hinted at. Long, dramatic posts, vague enough to avoid direct blame, but targeted enough that everyone knew. Some people forget who raised them. Some hearts turn cold when money enters the picture. So sad what our family has become. The likes rolled in. Aunties, cousins, old church ladies. Comments filled with pity for the wrong people. Her mother posted a throwback photo. Jacqueline, at 10 years old in her Sunday dress, smiling next to her parents. Caption, "We gave her everything, and now we don't even get a text back." It wasn't just a post, it was a performance, a manipulation played out for an audience of hundreds. Jacqueline read it all in silence. Then she muted her name in search, blocked the worst accounts, and whispered to herself, "They can act heartbroken all they want, but I'm done playing the daughter who saves everyone, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be the villain in someone else's fairy tale." Jacqueline opened her blinds just a little, enough to see what she expected. Her mother standing outside again, this time not in pajamas, but in her favorite leopard print sweater, hair curled, lipstick on, holding a Bible. Theatrix. Always theatrix. Her cousin paced nearby, holding a box of cookies from a childhood bakery. And then her mother began to cry, loudly, dramatically. The same woman who once said, "You act like we owe you gratitude," now sobbed for the neighborhood to hear. "She's punishing us. All we did was ask for help." Jacqueline stood inside, calm, blank, because she remembered that same sweater worn during the last Thanksgiving when her mom accidentally called her ungrateful in front of everyone. She remembered those same tears spilled when Mom was caught lying about the money. Everything was familiar, too familiar. Leopard sweater, crocodile tears, different day, same script. And Jacqueline, she wasn't auditioning anymore. She turned away from the window, because the show might still be going on, but she'd walked off the stage. It showed up in a Facebook photo, a cheap coffee mug, white ceramic, the words printed in gold cursive, "Best daughter in the world." It sat beside a slice of burnt toast, a caption written by her mother, "No matter how far they go, a mother's love never dies. #one daughter, #still my baby." It was public, performative, and absolutely not about love. Jacqueline stared at the screen, not with rage, not even with sadness anymore, but with a strange, sharp laughter. That mug, it was the one she bought for herself years ago, during a clearance sale. She left it at her parents' house by accident. They never noticed it, never used it, until now when it became a prop in a pity campaign. She didn't comment, didn't share, didn't defend. Instead, she opened her notes app, wrote 3 lines. "Love isn't a caption. Motherhood isn't a hashtag. And I'm not a prop." Then she closed the app, took a sip of her own coffee from a black ceramic mug that simply said no. It didn't happen in a therapist's office or on some empowering podcast. It happened on her porch, barefoot, in an old hoodie, clutching a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Jacqueline sat down on the wooden step just after blocking the last of her mother's burner accounts. 12 minutes. That's how long it lasted. 12 minutes of ugly crying, screaming into her own sweater, whispering, "I can't believe they did this," over and over. 12 minutes where everything poured out. The guilt, the confusion, the years of giving and never being enough. The fear of turning into someone cold. The ache of becoming someone who says no and means it. And when it was done, she didn't feel heroic. She didn't feel strong. She just felt emptied. But for once, not used. For the first time in years, she wasn't anyone's emotional trash can. Not their fixer, not their rescuer. Just a woman on a porch finally making space for her own pain. And when she went back inside, she didn't wipe away her tears. She let them dry. She didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity, boundaries, closure. And her lawyer delivered all three in a crisp 3-paragraph letter. It started with, "To whom it may concern, this correspondence formally notifies you," and ended with, "All further contact should be made through legal counsel only." Jacqueline didn't yell, didn't plead. She didn't need to, because this time it wasn't her voice that delivered the final word. It was a watermark, a signature, a registered envelope. Her family received it. Some ignored it. Some mocked it. Some even posted online, calling her cruel and cold. But Jacqueline, she slept soundly that night, because the most loving thing she ever did was tell them this ends here, not with a fight, with a document. The first night in the new apartment was quiet. Not peaceful, not yet, just quiet. No passive-aggressive sighs from her mother, no muffled arguments through thin walls. No one asking her, "Did you shut off the gas? Did you pay the cable bill? Where's the grocery money?" She sat on the hardwood floor, surrounded by unopened boxes, sipping cold tea from a chipped mug she didn't even remember packing. It wasn't much. The apartment was small. There was no couch, no TV, just a mattress on the floor and one lamp. But the silence, it didn't ask her for anything. For the first time in years, Jacqueline could breathe without calculating her worth. She didn't owe anyone an explanation, or a dollar, or a ride, or her peace. It was the first space she entered where her presence wasn't a transaction. The gas? Yes, she shut it off. And for once, she didn't have to explain why. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a knock on the door. It was a sentence, echoing, "We didn't raise you to be like this." Jacqueline wasn't sure if she remembered her mother saying it or if it had just lived so long in her brain that now it played itself on repeat. She stood in aisle 6 at the grocery store, frozen between the peanut butter jars and the almond milk. Her fingers gripped the cart, but her breath caught in her chest. This is what emotional manipulation feels like, even when they're not in the room. It creeps up in moments you thought were yours. It whispers when all you wanted was silence. We didn't raise you to be cold. We didn't raise you to shut us out. You used to care. They didn't raise her to be this version of herself, but they didn't raise her at all. They used her. They guilted her. They shaped her into a provider, a fixer, a daughter with an open wallet and a shut mouth. Now she was none of those things. And that sentence, it wasn't a curse anymore. It was a confession. They were right. They didn't raise her to be like this, because this version of Jacqueline was free. It started as a simple task: organize her email folders, clean up cloud storage, just something to distract herself. But what she opened was a timeline of betrayal. The folder was labeled Family Support 2016 to 2023. She clicked it open. There were bank statements, screenshots of Venmo transfers, PDF receipts from utility bills she didn't live under, $437.91 to her sister's electricity, $298.22 for Dad's cell phone bill, monthly car insurance for a vehicle she never drove, PayPal notes, for emergency vet bill, school fees, late rent again, 7 years, dozens of transactions. She kept scrolling. One email from 2019. "Hey Jack, sorry again. Can you cover Mom's meds this month?" Another. "I promise I'll pay you back after tax season." Another. "You're the only one who has a stable job. Please." Jacqueline sat frozen, laptop burning her thighs, because here in black and white was proof she hadn't imagined the exploitation. It had been systematic, planned, and worst of all, expected. Not once did they ask if she was okay. Not once did they say thank you. Every message assumed she would say yes. She clicked select all, hovered over delete, paused. No, she renamed the folder Receipts, so I never forget. She didn't need it for court. She needed it for clarity. for when guilt tried to creep in again. Because this was not cold-hearted, it was documentation. And in that moment, Jacqueline finally saw the truth. She had been the safety net for people who never planned to catch her. Jacqueline used to think investing meant stocks, crypto, real estate, but none of those ever made her feel safe. Her real investment started with $200. It was a Sunday morning. She walked into a tiny wellness studio tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. No one knew her there. No one asked her for anything. She paid $200 for a 6-week course called Boundaries and Balance. It felt silly at first, but then the therapist said, "The peace you protect will be the future you live in." That line alone was worth every cent. Jacqueline started keeping a spreadsheet peace fund. It tracked yoga classes she never had time for, a noise-canceling headset to block out chaos, therapy sessions where she didn't have to minimize her pain, even new locks on her apartment door, not to keep people out, but to keep peace in. Every dollar she used on herself didn't feel like spending. It felt like returning to the woman who didn't owe her calm to anyone, who didn't apologize for silence, who didn't answer just because a phone rang. This wasn't revenge. This was recovery. And for the first time, Jacqueline realized, you don't have to be rich to invest in peace. You just have to stop giving your energy to chaos. Jacqueline used to believe love could fix anything. She thought if she just gave more, waited longer, explained better, eventually they'd understand. Eventually they'd stop hurting her. But here's the truth, she learned. You can't heal people who keep reopening your wounds. She tried, she listened through shouting, gave through guilt, showed up through silence. She told herself, they don't mean to hurt me. They're just struggling. It's not their fault. But how many times can you bleed for people who won't even bandage their own hands? Jacqueline finally realized they didn't want healing. They wanted control. They wanted access to her strength without ever offering their own. So she stopped, not out of hate, but out of love for herself. She didn't answer the last voicemail, didn't respond to the cousin's Facebook post, didn't explain her absence from another family holiday. Instead, she whispered to herself, I can love them, but I don't have to lose myself trying to fix them. And that was the moment her healing truly began. Because sometimes the bravest thing they'll ever do is walk away from people you love when they keep choosing to hurt you. There was no announcement, no speech, no dramatic makeover, just Jacqueline walking into the room. Head high, back straight, peaceful, not angry, not trying to prove a point, not seeking apology or recognition. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't a return. It was simply her life now, and she was finally choosing to live it on her own terms. The same relatives who used to whisper ungrateful now lowered their eyes. The same cousin who once asked for just a small loan suddenly remembered his manners. But Jacqueline wasn't interested in anyone's guilt. She wasn't there to make them squirm. She wasn't there to relive trauma. She just came to show herself, I can stand in the same room that once broke me and not break again. That was the real transformation. Not the clothes, not the job title, not the money, but the quiet in her chest, the absence of fear, the fact that she didn't flinch when someone said family. Jacqueline wasn't pretending to be okay, she was okay. Jacqueline barely stepped into the gathering before the curtain lifted. There was her mother, in the floral dress Jacqueline had bought for her 2 years ago, a dress she swore she never liked. Now it flowed like silk in slow motion, as if she'd been waiting for this scene all morning. Her father followed, cane in hand, limping theatrically, though Jacqueline remembered clearly his limp only came out when there was something to gain. They didn't speak right away. Instead, they let the room fall silent, all eyes on Jacqueline as if she was late to her own trial. Then her mother exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for days. So this is who you are now, she said, cold, unreachable. Jacqueline didn't flinch. She simply smiled, because she'd seen this scene before, rehearsed, rewritten, performed at birthdays, funerals, even brunch. The tears were real enough, but not for Jacqueline. They mourned the loss of access, not relationship. Her father tapped the cane twice, then looked at her with eyes that had once made her feel 5 years old. "You could have just helped, baby," he said. "You didn't have to destroy everything." And for once, Jacqueline didn't explain, didn't comfort, didn't cry, because now she understood they weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to guilt her back into place. But this time, she wasn't taking the role. She wasn't in the play anymore. She was just done watching. It came from her aunt, the one who always smiled too wide and spoke like every word was dipped in syrup. She looked Jacqueline up and down, her tailored coat, quiet gaze, and the absence of apology. Then, almost as if accusing, she said, "You look different." Jacqueline didn't miss a beat. She didn't soften, she didn't laugh it off, she didn't shrink to make it easier for the room. Instead, she locked eyes and said, "I am." The room went still. Because what do you say to someone who finally stopped pretending? There were no dramatic tears, no speech, no need to explain. That one sentence said it all. She was different. She was finally herself. There was no toast, no awkward birthday song, no forced clinking of glasses, no speech about forgiveness disguised as guilt. And Jacqueline was completely fine with that. She stood near the window, a cup of lukewarm tea in her hand, watching sunlight stretch across the floor. The house behind her murmured with whispers, shifting glances, but none of it touched her anymore. No one handed her a gift. No one made a scene. No one faked a smile just to make themselves feel better. And for the first time, that was enough, because Jacqueline didn't come for a celebration. She didn't return to receive love in the form of obligation, apology, or public display. She came to stand still in a room that once suffocated her and breathe. No one hugged her, no one cried, and she didn't need them to. There was no validation. No, "you were right." No, "we're sorry." Only silence. And in that silence, Jacqueline felt more free than she had in years. Sometimes healing doesn't come with applause. It comes in the quiet, when you realize you're no longer waiting for anyone else to change. The music wasn't loud. It floated in from the hallway, an old playlist she made years ago, still tucked into the background of her phone. No one else noticed it. But Jacqueline did. Her body remembered before her mind did. Fingers tapping, shoulders loosening, hips swaying slightly. And for once, she didn't stop herself. She didn't check the room. She didn't shrink in case someone judged her. She didn't wonder if dancing now meant she wasn't taking things seriously enough. She just let go. Not in some grand cinematic way, not spinning across the floor like in the movies, just a quiet rhythm, a pulse that said, "You're allowed." She was allowed to move, to smile, to feel the music without guilt, without grief, without giving something up in return. There was no one to applaud her, but no one to hold her back either. For the first time in a long time, Jacqueline danced and didn't owe anybody an explanation. Not for the rhythm, not for the healing, not for the joy. She could have said a lot. She could have reminded them of every lie, every overdraft, every moment they left her bleeding so they could keep pretending. She could have turned around on that porch, faced them with shaking hands and a trembling voice, and finally let it all out. But Jacqueline didn't, because that's what they wanted. A reaction, a breakdown, something to twist and retell in a version that made her the villain. So instead, she picked up her bag. She walked to her car, and she drove off. No final speech, no tears, no closure. She didn't say goodbye. She said nothing. And for the first time, nothing was everything. It wasn't silence from defeat. It was silence from healing, from no longer needing to prove, perform, or plead. Because when you truly break free, You don't scream. You don't explain. You just leave. 1 year, 365 days, 12 months without a single call. No birthday card, no text, not even a forwarded meme from her aunt that used to arrive every Sunday without fail. And the strangest part, Jacqueline didn't feel hollow. She didn't feel angry. She didn't even feel relieved. She felt still. There was no rush of freedom, no celebration of escape. Just a kind of quiet knowing that this silence, this absence, was finally real. No more gaslighting. No more pretending things were fine. No more obligations dressed up as love. Just her apartment, her tea, her breath. Jacqueline no longer had to flinch at unknown numbers. She no longer kept her phone on Do Not Disturb out of defense, because no one was calling. And that, in its own strange way, was peace, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't sparkle, but settles deep in your bones and whispers, "You survived them, and now you're free to live without apology." Jacqueline didn't expect anyone. It was her birthday again, the first one since she cut them off completely. No cards, no surprises, no drama. Just quiet. Until the doorbell rang. She paused, tea in hand, wearing her softest sweatshirt. It could have been a neighbor, a wrong address, a package, but when she opened the door, it was Christine. Christine, the cousin who used to braid her hair in the summers, the one who drifted away slowly as Jacqueline became the responsible one, the one who never picked a side but also never showed up. She stood there holding a small cake with slanted frosting and a single crooked candle. No gift bag, no excuses, just her. "I know I wasn't there," Christine said, "but I see it now, I really do, and I just didn't want you to be alone today." That was it. No grand speeches. No digging into old wounds. Just presence, just honesty, just a real connection. Jacqueline didn't cry. Not right away, but when Christine lit the candle and said, "Make a wish," something inside her cracked and softened. Because for the first time in a long, long while, someone showed up not to take, not to blame, but to simply say, "I see you." As the candle flickered out, Jacqueline didn't make a wish. She just watched the smoke rise slowly, softly, like the past leaving her for good. Christine sat beside her in silence, 2 mugs of tea between them, the kind of silence that didn't demand words, just space. Then Christine spoke. "You know, I used to think you were cold, harsh, selfish even." Jacqueline didn't flinch. She'd heard it before. "But now, I think maybe you were just the first one brave enough to escape." That stopped her. Because Christine wasn't just talking about birthday cards or bank accounts. She was talking about years of guilt, of being told that love meant sacrifice, that being family meant giving everything, even when you had nothing left. She was talking about quiet dinners where no one spoke truth, about thank you being replaced with you should have, about gaslighting disguised as concern, and the burden that gets handed down generation to generation to the strongest one in the room. "They made us believe we owed them everything," Christine whispered. "But we didn't. We just wanted to be loved, not used." Jacqueline exhaled and for the first time felt seen, not as a villain, but as a survivor. Jacqueline lit the candle again, not because she wanted to make a wish, but because she could. No one forced her to smile. No one was waiting with a guilt trip or a sarcastic comment. There was no performance, no eyes to please, no version of herself to shrink into. Just her, and one small flame. The room was dim, warm with quiet. Christine had gone. The dishes were still in the sink. The tea had gone cold. But inside her stillness, not the kind that comes from isolation, but the kind that arrives after choosing peace over approval, she didn't wish for anything. Not love, not reconciliation, not even understanding. She didn't need it anymore. For the first time in her life, Jacqueline realized that peace wasn't something you were given, it was something you protected, built with boundaries, fortified by silence, fueled by truth. She stared at the flame and whispered, not a wish, but a truth she now believed. I owe no one my life but me. Then she blew out the candle. Not to end something, but to mark the beginning of everything she would now choose freely. The next morning, the sunlight poured through Jacqueline's window like a quiet affirmation. No missed calls, no guilt-filled voicemails, no noise. She sat at her desk where bills used to stack and stress used to live. Now, just a cup of coffee and her open laptop where her new business plan blinked back at her, alive with possibility. It wasn't flashy, but it was hers. She glanced at a photo frame once filled with a family portrait. She'd replaced it last week with a snapshot of a sunrise she took on a solo trip to Montana. That picture said more about her now than any bloodline ever could. I don't belong to them anymore, she whispered. And she didn't say it with bitterness. She said it like a fact, like gravity, like something that had always been true. She had just taken a little too long to believe it. She wasn't the wallet. She wasn't the emotional sponge. She wasn't the stand-in for parental dreams or failures. She was Jacqueline, independent, whole, free. And though her past might still knock, she now had the power to decide whether or not to open the door. People said Jacqueline's silence was harsh, that she was cruel for not replying, for not showing up at the hospital, for not saying, I forgive you when they finally apologized years too late. But what they never understood was that her silence wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. It was power. It was peace. Silence was where she found herself again after being erased by everyone who claimed to love her. It wasn't a wall, it was a garden. In silence, she could breathe without being blamed, think without being gaslit, heal without being asked to hurry up for someone else's comfort. And maybe they'll never get it. Maybe they'll keep telling the story wrong, that she was heartless, cold, ungrateful. But she knows better now. Her silence was a gift she gave herself, not to be right, but to be whole. I didn't disappear, she once told Christine. I just finally appeared where I could actually exist. And in that silence, Jacqueline found not loneliness, but freedom. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is walking away from those who only know how to take. This story isn't just about family betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice after being silenced, rebuilding your worth after being drained, and realizing that being the strong one doesn't mean you should carry everyone else's weight. True love, even within family, must come with respect, boundaries, and choice. When those are missing, walking away is not selfish, it's survival. So if you've ever felt like Jacqueline, responsible for everyone, yet seen by no one, let this story remind you you're allowed to choose peace over obligation. You're allowed to choose yourself. If this story moved you, if you saw a part of yourself in Jacqueline, hit subscribe now, because here we tell the stories no one dares to. We speak truth where silence was forced, and we remind you, you are not alone. Subscribe for more stories that heal, empower, and wake the soul.